Hi everyone, this is Arcadius and welcome back to Naval. Today we'll be going over the stats clash for the Tier 4 matchmaking cruisers, but before that we did have a slight update. However, I'm not entirely sure what happened in this update. Usually there is a Facebook post that explains what's going to happen, and it gives us some forewarning before the update hits. However, out of all the pages that I can check, there's three of them, not a single one had any information about what this update had. However, there was still an updated patch you could add to the game when you first opened it, and I determined that you could actually purchase Albany now, which is the copy paste of Oregon City. So obviously I purchased her since she is a prism ship, so I have another one to my collection. However, I am quite disappointed. It's not disappointed in the ship itself, she performs amazingly. I am disappointed because there's nothing that separates her from Oregon City. The only difference between this ship and Albany is her AA suite, which has the twin 3-inch guns instead of the 40mm guns. So she does have slightly better anti-aircraft defense, but that is literally the only difference. I guess you could also include the fact that she has a slightly faster gun rate of fire, but there's no radar gimmick like I kind of expected her to have. All she has is the normal DCP, the heal, and the defensive AA. I mean, she's not bad in game, she can do amazingly, but there's just nothing to separate her from a normal tech tree ship. So if you want the same kind of gameplay, you just buy your own ship in the tech tree and you don't have to spend any prisms. So yeah, kind of disappointed in that, but she is available for purchase if you are interested in it. This is the first Prism American heavy cruiser outside of Alaska and Guam, which are kind of classified as large cruisers instead of heavy cruisers. So first real heavy cruiser for America, that's for Prisms. And we're starting off pretty disappointing. Like I said, that's not because she's a bad ship. She's an amazing ship. I've had a really good game with her. But there's nothing special about her in any way. She's kind of similar to Newport News in the fact that she's pretty much exactly just like a Des Moines. The only thing is that she gets little jets in the back, and that's about it. Besides that, if there's anything else in the update, I don't know. There's no new sister ships, there's no new packs, no nothing, just an Albany. That's it. The only real difference I've noticed is that there's a new flag you can get. There's a couple of them out. I don't know if that's something recent or if I just didn't notice or whatever, but I noticed that today as well. So yeah, not a lot in this update it seems, but maybe there'll be more in the next update. Alright, so enough about these ships. For Albany specifically, we'll be going over her in a lot more detail in her own personal video, which will be out later this week. And we are actually going to go over to our tier 4 matchmaking cruiser stats clash. Alright, so for cruisers, we have 9 cruisers. So we have quite a lot of numbers to go through today. Starting off, we have Yubari, which is a Japanese wannabe light cruiser, wannabe super destroyer. It's kind of in between. It was an experimental ship, so there's only one of her. And she was an event ship, but she's still technically a matchmaking 4. Well, she's a 3.8, but she's close enough that we're going to be going over her stats. Everything about her is trash except one thing, and that's her torpedoes, which are honestly still kind of trash if you look at a certain aspect. We'll go over more of that in a moment. Next we have Kuma. We saw her last week in tier 3, but she is a 3.5, so she'll also be tossed into the occasional tier 4 game. We have Sendai, which is a light cruiser of 4.5 matchmaking for Japan. We'll see her again next week, but for now she will be in tier 4. She's pretty much just a copycat Kuma, except you get a fighter and a couple extra. There's not much really to her, honestly, but she's still pretty good. Next we have the American light cruiser Omaha, which is notably famous for being a trash ship because of how easy she is to sink and destroy, but honestly that can go for any cruiser at tier 4, so there's not really any exception there. But yeah, she's a pretty strong ship. She has a lot of 6-inch guns, and that firepower does come out quite well in game. Next we have Karlsruhe, which I finally figured out how to pronounce correctly. Thank you, Google. And regardless, yeah, this ship is pretty fun. I call it the German railgun because of how fast her armor-piercing shell velocity is. But besides that, there's nothing really that separates her from the group, and she's completely outclassed by the other matchmaking. Well, it's a 4.5, but German cruiser at this tier, which is Königsberg, which has the same kind of shell velocity, so she's just as good with even more guns, better torpedoes, and all over pretty well, really good. I really like this ship, honestly. And then we have Ninghai again at a 3.5, still pretty pathetic, but still kind of fun. And then we have Caledon. We saw her last week, but she's a 3.5 as well. This ship is kind of outclassed at this tier. She wasn't exactly overpowered at tier 3 either, so putting her in tier 4, it really kind of makes her struggle. And then we have our first tech tree Russian cruiser, Krasny Kavkaz. We've already seen one Russian cruiser that was Aurora at tier 2, but Aurora was an event ship. This is a tech tree ship, so we are now seeing the Russian cruiser line, and this ship is one of the strongest ships, in my opinion, at this tier. She's kind of a jack of all trades, and she has a special kind of gameplay. So let's toss ourselves right into the numbers. Let's see what we have. All right, so health-wise, as mentioned, Yubari is that kind of experimental cruiser, so she does have a lot less health than all the other ships at about 18,300. Krasny Kavkaz has the most at 28,500, which is almost a difference of, actually it's more than, it's what, 10,200 difference between Yubari and Kavkaz. So there's a lot of health to be taken there. Everyone else is about the same, though Sendai is pretty high as well at 27.2, and Omaha is pretty similar, but all the others are about 23, 24. Nothing spectacular. Torpedo percent resistance, only 3 cruisers have it. Königsberg has 8%, Ninghai has 10%, and Krasny Kavkaz has 8%. Though with Kavkaz having the most health and a torpedo damage resistance percent, she is quite strong against some torpedoes. Not all of them. There will be some cruisers, though, that will not be able to sink her when going through a torpedo broadside. And we'll go over that near the end of the video. Belt armor, Omaha, Caledon, and Krasny Kavkaz have the most at about 3 inches or 75 mils. And everyone else has pretty trash armor, I guess you could say. Well, it's not as strong. We have Sendai and Kumo, which are pretty okay, as well as Karlsruhe at 60 to 65. But Yubari has pretty much nothing. Königsberg has 20, or at least that's what it says in the game. It doesn't even say what Ninghai's belt armor is, so I don't even know. But regardless, you don't really have any ships that can tank at this tier. You're all just floating citadels. Turning circle radius, Ninghai and Caledon actually have the smallest radius of 460 meters, while Königsberg, Krasny Kavkaz have the worst at 660, though Omaha and the Japanese cruisers are not far behind. But you're all pretty much around the same if you exclude Ninghai and Caledon and Yubari. Speed-wise, Yubari and Kuma are the fastest ships at 34.5 knots. Omaha is pretty close at 34 knots. And the slowest ship is going to be Ninghai at 23 knots, so it's not going to be hard to sink her at all. Surface detectability, however, that is where Ninghai excels. She has the lowest detection of 8.7 kilometers, and Omaha has the worst detection at 13.5 kilometers, but is followed quite closely by Krasny Kavkaz at 13.1. In terms of air detectability, we are going to see carriers now, so it is somewhat important. Though in a cruiser, it's not really. Yubari has the best air detectability at 4.6 kilometers. That's really, really good. And then Krasny Kavkaz actually has the worst at 7.4 kilometers. So yeah, quite a difference there. Next we go to guns. So Yubari has 140, actually all the Japanese cruisers and Ninghai have 140 mils, which is about 5.4 inch. Omaha has 6 inch, same as Karlsruhe and Königsberg. They're just under 6 inch. It's a 5.9 or just about. And then Caledon has a 6 inch, and then Krasny Kavkaz actually has a 7 inch gun. We're actually starting to get into heavy cruiser caliber weaponry, even though Kavkaz is still considered a light cruiser. 180-degree turn time. So every ship has turrets, I guess you could say. There's no real casemates, except, well, Omaha's casemates, but she also has turrets. And then for Karlsruhe, she has side guns that can turn, but for the most part, a lot of her guns are on the center line. Then Kuma and Sendai are pretty similar in that way as well. Um, we're stepping away from ships like Dresden and Kolberg with guns just lined on either side. We're starting to see cruisers that have guns on the center line, which means you can use pretty much every single gun you have every time you fire on the broadside. And that will help us quite considerably. 180-degree turn time. Caledon has the fastest turning turrets at 12 seconds, and Königsberg and Kavkaz have the worst or the slowest turning turrets at 30 seconds for both. Rate of fire. Kuma and Sendai have the best rate of fire at 10 rounds a minute, and Krasny Kavkaz has the worst at only 5.5 rounds a minute. In terms of seconds, that means Kuma Sendai have a 6-second reload, while Kavkaz has a 10. Actually, that's not right. So yeah, you can see the seconds there. It's 10.9 seconds for a reload. And it actually looks like I have a mistake. Looks like the seconds for rate of fire for Königsberg is actually supposed to be 9.2 second reload. So not 13.8. So that would mean that Krasny Kavkaz does have the longest reload in terms of seconds and rate of fire. However, in terms of damages, she does stand out. So Krasny Kavkaz has the highest HE damage at 3,150, and Caledon is pretty close at 3,100 as well, but the rest are about 2,000 to 2,300, and Omaha actually has 2,800, so she's pretty strong as well. So Omaha, Caledon, and Krasny Kavkaz have the strongest HE shells. Fire percent, Kavkaz, Omaha, and it looks like Caledon have the highest chance of fire. HE piercing, Kavkaz has the highest at 31 millimeters, and Yubari, well, every ship that has 140 mils has only 28 millimeters of piercing. There's really not that much difference here, and you're going to have enough pen to go through any kind of armor, so it's kind of irrelevant. High explosive velocity, however, Königsberg has the fastest at 916 meters per second high explosive velocity. That's followed closely by Kavkaz at 919, and then the rest are about 850, 860, and then Omaha has the least at 811, which is still not bad. Armor piercing damage, Kavkaz has the highest at 4400, and then it's actually Omaha at 3400, and then the Germans have 3000 as well as the British, and then all the 140 millimeter guns have 2200. Armor piercing velocity, both Karlsruhe and Königsberg have 960 meters per second, so again, very, very fast. Caledon and Kavkaz are both fast at 936 and 919 respectively, and then the rest are pretty slow, and Omaha actually gets even slower, down to 762 meters per second. What this means in terms of number of shells is Yubari can send out 36 shells because she only has 2 twin turrets. Kuma can send out 60 shells on a broadside since she has 6 single guns on a broadside. Same with Sendai, 6 single guns. Omaha has 2 twin turrets and 4 single casemates to a broadside, sending out 64 shells a minute. Karlsruhe has about 5 single guns on a broadside to send out 45. And Königsberg has 3 triple turrets that send out 54 shells. Ninghai has 3 twin turrets that send out 48 shells per minute. Caledon also has 5 single guns that send out only 30 shells per minute, and Krasny Kavkaz has 4 single guns that can send out only 20 shells per minute. So anytime Kuma, Sendai, or Omaha are in a battle with Krasny Kavkaz, they're dishing out 3 times as many shells as Kavkaz is in 1 minute. So the rate of fire is quite important, and also the number of guns you have. What that means in terms of number of fires, according to the fire percent chance, Yubari can set 2 fires, Kuma and Sendai can set 4, Omaha can set 7, Karlsruhe can set 3, Königsberg can set 4, Ninghai can set 3, and then Caledon and Kavkaz can also set 2. Nothing too spectacular. However, when it comes to high explosive alpha, Omaha is the highest at 22,400, which is actually leagues above anyone else. I think the second highest is going to be Königsberg at 18,000, but that's still at least 4,400, or yeah, 4,400 difference. Armor piercing alpha, Omaha again is the highest at 27,200, though Königsberg is just below that at 27,000. Then everything else is pretty much around the same, though Kavkaz is pretty substantial as well. In terms of high explosive and armor piercing damage, Yubari is going to be the least. She has the least number of guns, and she's pretty much just a destroyer. In terms of gun ranges, Krasny Kavkaz has the longest range at 13.7 kilometers, Ninghai has the lowest at 10.8 kilometers, and then all the other cruisers are actually pretty similar. I guess another notable exception is Königsberg at 13.2 kilometers, but everyone else is between 11.5 to 12.5 or so. It's pretty much the same. 4 cruisers do have secondaries. Yubari has 1 single secondary at the very front. That goes out to 5 kilometers. Karlsruhe has 3 single secondaries on the center line that go out to 3.5. Königsberg also has 3 single secondaries that go out to 4 kilometers, and then Kavkaz actually has, let's see here, 8 secondaries total, and she's actually a really good secondary brawler, believe it or not, and she has secondaries that go out to 4.5 kilometers. Out of all these ships with secondaries, only Kavkaz is pretty much effective with them. All the others are just for show. In terms of gun range, though, like I said, there's a couple exceptions, such as Königsberg and Kavkaz and Ninghai, but besides that, they're all pretty much the same. In terms of AA defense, however, this is where we start getting very different numbers. So we do see carriers, and carriers do play an important part at this tier. Even if they don't have that much aircraft, there's not really a lot of ships that can shoot down the aircraft, so they just fly around very slowly without being shot down. There are a couple of exceptions to this, though. In terms of AA defense, we have a few options, and there is actually a couple of consumables that we see now that can increase that. So this is the first that we see of the defensive AA consumable, which increases your damage to aircraft for a certain amount of time. It doesn't give an exact number of how much it increases it, but I'm going to say it's so if your normal, for example, Yubari, if it was normal attack of 35 damage per second, then using the AA consumable would make it 30, so it would double it effectively. Now, there's only 2 ships that have that, which is Sendai and Krasny Kavkaz, so we're going to go over the normal AA first. So in terms of normal AA, we have Omaha at 59 DPS, Ninghai at 54 DPS, and Krasny Kavkaz at 55 DPS. These 3 ships have the strongest AA of the cruisers at this tier. They may not have the longest ranges. Yubari actually has the longest range, but she doesn't really have the damage. In terms of least, we have Karlsruhe, which will never shoot down a plane in its entire life. It has 3 DPS. Interesting thing about Omaha, however, is that she has her long range and medium range AA guns out to the same range of about 3.5 kilometers, which do 14 DPS and 22 DPS at the same time. So she's doing 36 DPS at 3.5 kilometers, which is really, really good. However, if we include the anti-air defense consumable, that actually boosts Sendai all the way up to 70, and Krasny Kavkaz all the way up to 110, which means that it would be Kavkaz, Sendai, and Omaha as the top three. So either way, Omaha is going to have really good AA, but when Sendai and Kavkaz activate their defensive consumables, she is outclassed. And so we see that Kavkaz has really strong guns, really good secondaries, and also really good AA. And we're not even to the torpedoes yet. And here we are, torpedoes. So remember when I said how Yubari has one exception to being trash, and that's her torpedoes? Well, that's in terms of her torpedo damage. She has the strongest torpedoes in the game, singularly. Not altogether. Her broadside's not as strong as some other destroyers, but torpedo to torpedo, she has the strongest in the game at 30,000 damage per torpedo. That's more than you have one torpedo for about one carrier at this tier, maybe two for a battleship, and she can launch 4 of them. The downside to this is that the angles to launch such torpedoes are absolutely trash, the worst ever, and the speed is a measly 30 knots, so you're not going to get anywhere fast. In terms of torpedo ranges, we have Sendai's second set of torpedoes being the farthest at 8 kilometers, and Karlsruhe's first set being the shortest at only 4 kilometers. You can see the speeds here. Sendai's second set and Königsberg have the fastest torpedoes at 64 knots, and Yubari's has the slowest at 30. In terms of rate of fire, Sendai has the worst kind of reload at 80 seconds, while we also have Ninghai at 31.9 seconds, so really good there. In terms of torpedo damage, you're not going to outclass Yubari no matter what you do, but Sendai's first set and Königsberg's are pretty powerful as well. In terms of broadside damage, Yubari can do 120,000 damage, which is phenomenal. And then we have Königsberg, which has the second highest at 81,000 damage. She's really, really powerful and is one of only a few ships at this tier that can actually sink every single ship it comes across with torpedoes. She has 2 triple launchers on each side. Now, so does Krasny Kavkaz, but she doesn't get nearly as much damage. In terms of flood percent, Yubari is at the top again at 265.56% chance to flood, though Sendai's first set and Königsberg's set are pretty powerful there as well. In terms of stealth, Caledon and the first set of Karlsruhe's torpedoes are the stealthiest at 1.1 kilometers, and Ninghai's torpedoes are the least stealthiest at 2 kilometers detectability. In terms of secondaries, Yubari has the one secondary. It's a 127 millimeter. It's a 5-inch gun, and it fires high explosive. Karlsruhe has 3 secondaries on the broadside of 88 millimeter that fire high explosive. Königsberg has 2 on the broadside. She has 1 on the center line, 2 on the wing, so she can only fire 2 at once, and they fire high explosive. And then Krasny Kavkaz has 7. She has 3 twins and 1 single on the broadside, which are 100 millimeter or 4-inch, and they also fire high explosive. Sendai and Omaha actually get aircraft as well. Sendai gets 1 plane, which is a fighter, rank 6, that has 2,000 health and a speed of 162 knots. And Omaha gets 2 planes, which are fighters, which are only rank 5, a health of 1,830, and a speed of 156 knots. And then we have consumables. In terms of consumables, every single ship has a damage control party that has a cooldown of 1 minute and unlimited charges. However, Krasny Kavkaz and all the Japanese cruisers, the DCP lasts the least at only 5 seconds before it goes to the cooldown. But Ninghai and Caledon actually have the longest lasting damage control party of 15 seconds. So they have a little bit better survivability there. 2 ships get a heal, that is Sendai and Caledon. Sendai gets the better heal considering it has a shorter cooldown and more charges. She gets 3 of them versus Caledon, which only gets 2, but they both have the same heal duration of 30 seconds. 2 ships get hydroacoustic search, which will be able to assist you in detecting torpedoes and also ships and a smokescreen. Those are the German cruisers, and they are exactly identical. They last 90 seconds, but they take 120 seconds to cool down, and they have 4 charges. And then, as mentioned, 2 ships have the defensive AA consumable, Sendai and Krasny Kavkaz. Sendai's lasts 30 seconds and has a cooldown of 120 seconds and 4 charges, and Krasny Kavkaz actually lasts 36 seconds, so a little bit longer, and the same cooldown and the same number of charges. So you can kind of see how Kavkaz is pretty substantial. Not only does she have the largest caliber guns for a cruiser at this tier, she has the most health, she has one of the top torpedo damage resistance, she has really good AA, she has really good torpedoes, she has really good secondaries. She's just all around a really good cruiser. That doesn't mean she's necessarily overpowered, she's just really strong. And lastly, we have our torpedo comparison chart. So we went over the destroyers last week, and we saw that only Clemson's second set were really powerful enough to take on the battleships. And we have similar problems with the cruisers, with only Königsberg and Kavkaz and Yubari being able to take on any of the battleships. Yubari and Königsberg being the only ones to be able to sink all 3 of them. Kavkaz is only able to sink Kaiser and Ganga, but cannot quite finish Queen Mary. In terms of the carriers, though, they are a little bit more survivable. So if you have Kuma, you will not be able to sink a carrier. Omaha cannot sink Hermes. Karlsruhe cannot sink any carrier with either set of torpedo, pretty much. Ninghai can't do anything except destroyers, but still not a lot of damage there. And even Kuma and the first set of Karlsruhe torpedoes cannot even touch Kavkaz on certain areas. So overall, it looks like Königsberg and Krasny Kavkaz have the better torpedoes, not including Yubari, which is absolutely destroying everything with torpedoes. In my opinion, going back over all these stats and everything like that, my top ships for Tier 4 are going to be Krasny Kavkaz because she's just all around really, really good. Not Caledon, not Ninghai. Königsberg because she has really, really good gun layout. The triple turrets are very welcome. She's the only ship at this tier that has them, and they are very useful. Add to that her hydroacoustic search for taking on destroyers and cruisers. And you also have a heal. Well, no, you don't have a heal, you have the torpedoes. The torpedoes that are really, really strong. Omaha has really good guns on really good AA as well when needed. And then I guess you could have Yubari as the one-trick pony with her amazing torpedoes, but not really the good. Sendai's pretty decent with her defensive AA as well. With that, I will wrap up today's video. If you like the video, make sure you like and subscribe. And next week, we'll be going over the Tier 4 battleships, which there are only 3 of them. So pretty quick video. And then between that, we should have our own video on Albany as well. So look forward to that as well. So thank you for watching and have a good day.